Welcome to episode 353 of the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I'm Ashley Scott Meyers, screenwriter and blogger over at sellingyourscreenplay.com. Today I'm interviewing writer-director Seth Larney, who just did a sci-fi film called 2067, which is about a time traveler who goes to the future to try to save a dying Earth. I love these types of epic sci-fi films, so I was excited to talk with him and hear how he put this film together. Definitely check out the trailer. This film looks really cool, lots of special effects. We talk about his journey as a filmmaker and specifically how he got this film produced. So stay tuned for that interview. If you find this episode valuable, please help me out by giving me a review in iTunes or leaving a comment on YouTube or retweeting the podcast on Twitter or liking or sharing it on Facebook. These social media shares really do help spread word about the podcast, so they're very much appreciated. Any websites or links that I mentioned in the podcast can be found on my blog in the show notes. I also publish a transcript with every episode in case you'd rather read the show or look at something later on. You can find all the podcast show notes at www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/podcast. And then just look for episode number 353. If you want my free guide, How to Sell a Screenplay in 5 Weeks, you can pick that up by going to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. It's completely free. You just put in your email address and I'll send you a new lesson once per week for 5 weeks along with a bunch of bonus lessons. I teach the whole process of how to sell your screenplay in that guide. I'll teach you how to write a professional logline and query letter and how to find agents, managers, and producers who are looking for material. Really is everything you need to know to sell your screenplay. Just go to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. Quick few words about what I'm working on. We're still moving along on my mystery thriller feature film, The Rideshare Killer. I just saw the latest cut and we're basically to locked picture. So the next week I've got to get all the other post folks moving along on their parts. And this is the composer to score the film, the colorist, the sound folks. There's a couple of visual effects shots, which will actually be done by my friend Kurt Weiser. Hey, Kurt, he's actually the one who puts this podcast together for me each week. So he also does special effects. And there's a few effect shots that I'll need him to do. It's going to be tight, but we're still hoping to get it done around the end of the year. I'm making our big announcement on Wednesday, November 4th, assuming we don't all descend into anarchy after the election, about the finalists and winners of SYS's six-figure screenplay contest. So do check that out. I'll be listing it just on sellingyourscreenplay.com in a blog post. And again, that's going to be Wednesday, November 4th. And that will be our final announcement for SYS's six-figure screenplay contest. Again, this coming Wednesday, we will announce our finalist and our winner of the contest. So those are the things I've been working on over the last week. Now let's get into the main segment. Today I am interviewing writer-director Seth Larney. Here is the interview. Welcome, Seth, to the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I really appreciate you coming on the show with me today.
Hey, thanks for having me, Ashley. It's a pleasure, mate.
So to start out, maybe you can tell us a little bit about your background. Where did you grow up and how did you get interested in the entertainment business?
Sure, man. I grew up in the forest in outback Australia and wanted to make movies from when I was 5 years old, and then got into the film industry when I was 19. My first film was The Matrix, and then The Matrix 2 and 3, and then I crewed on American movies in Sydney for, I'd say, something like 12 years or something like that to kind of earn my stripes, so to speak, to become a director. Yeah. Gotcha.
And what did you do on those two Matrix movies?
I was the digital assets manager. So that basically meant that I got to see every asset that was created for the film, whether it be a shot that was filmed or a visual effects shot or an art department, concept art. And then my job was to sort of make sense of all of those things and know what they all were so that I could distribute all those assets to the producers and the directors to save them time when they were reviewing stuff. So basically, yeah.
And how did you get that job? I always get questions from people like, this sounds like a good path for somebody that's doing what you're doing. How did you get that first job, that first entry-level job in the business?
Yeah, man. Well, I was actually, so our department on The Matrix was the first department to my knowledge in that time that had a sort of technical IT sort of department because of the sort of IT demands of the film. And I'd actually started working as a computer technician while I was still doing, let's call it high school in Australia. When I was about 15 years old, I started 1 day a week and then on full weekends and then 3 days a week, working as a computer technician while I was finishing my school. So when I saw they were looking for people to hire for the film, my way into that was with my computer kind of knowledge. I wanted to be in film, but I had sort of experience working with computers. And so that's what kind of got me the foot in, if you like.
Gotcha. And was that your plan all along? Like you knew even at 19 years old that you wanted to be a writer-director? And so you were on that sort of
Oh,
trajectory?
absolutely. Yeah, man. I think from when I was maybe 5 or 6 years old, I saw Short Circuit, and it sort of I asked my dad if how they had gotten this robot in Short Circuit, and he told me that they'd made him and he wasn't actually alive.
Gotcha.
That kind of blew my mind, and so I think from there I knew what I wanted to do. Yeah.
And so you have a number of credits on IMDb in various special effects positions. I'm curious. So you started out sort of, it sounds like sort of a technician or a technical guy. Were you also an artist, and did you learn those sort of digital artists as you were working, or was that something you sort of you had a background in as well?
Well, my father's actually an impressionist oil painter. So when I was
Oh,
growing up, I wanted to be an artist, right? He's one of the most incredible artists that I've ever met. And but my skills really turned out to be in a sort of technical kind of capacity when I was young and early on. So I saw that as a kind of bridge to making art, right? And so when I saw that people were starting to create visual effects shots with computers that were as artistic as these impressionist oil paintings I've seen, and would enable me to make movies, I realized that that was a way in for me to learn how to direct films, was to learn how to construct visual frames with computers. And so I got into visual effects really young, I think when I was maybe years old, and then used my experience on those Hollywood movies to start to become a visual effects artist and then transition into a visual effects supervisor. And that really helped me as a director because my brain works in a way where I like to know how things work before I will attempt to sort of do them. And I think visual effects is such a big part of storytelling these days that for
mhm.
me, I want to know what's the most efficient visual effects that I can use to most effectively tell a dramatic beat when I'm writing a screenplay. So I use that visual effects knowledge quite deeply in the writing phase as well as the directing phase.
Yeah, yeah, sure. So let's dig into your latest film, 2067. To start out, maybe you can give us a quick log line or pitch. What is this film all about?
Well, it's sort of set in the future, obviously in 2067, where we've deforested the planet and there's no more breathable oxygen for people to breathe. And so people are dying from these sort of physical rejections of this synthetic oxygen that is being administered to them. And they look to the future in a last-ditch attempt to see if there are survivors far off into the future, to see if they would have a cure for this oxygen sickness. And they receive a message back from the future that just simply says, send Ethan White. He gets shot off into the far future to discover if where are the people that sent for him and to try and get their cure. And then the movie is really this big allegory for, can we take control of our own destiny and take control of our own fate and save ourselves from our own destruction.
Yes, a good question for the modern era. So where did this idea come from? What was sort of the genesis of this story?
Well, as I said, I was growing up in the forest when I was young, and swimming in rivers and climbing trees was my assignments, right? And when I moved to the city and started working on film, and I heard a stat at one point when I was, this is maybe 20, 25 years ago, that the Amazon rainforest was being deforested. It was something like 3 football fields per minute, right? This is 25 years ago, mind you. The Amazon percent of all the world's breathable oxygen. And I just had this horrible thought that, we are steadily, ensuring the planet's our own destruction, and it's a really terrifying thought to me. And I just, this thought that our grandchildren or even children won't have the same privilege of growing up and access to the same sort of wildlife and nature that I did growing up is really terrifying. And that's the reason I make movies, right? They should be these fun experiences for audiences. But I think that if you message at the core of that it's not preachy, but hopefully a message that you walk out of the cinema and you say to yourself, wow, that was really fun. I had a really good time, but I feel something. And
Mhm.
maybe that becomes a platform for opening up these conversations about things that I think are hopefully important.
So let's dig into your writing process a little bit. I notice on IMDb there's an additional material writing credit for Dave Patterson. Maybe you can just describe sort of your relationship with him and how he contributed and what that credit actually meant.
Absolutely. Dave's a great talent that works here in Sydney as well. We're actually repped by the same agent. We had like a pretty big workload and we were looking for someone to come on and do a little punch-up pass of some of the dialogue of some of the sort of secondary characters. And he came in and just sort of breathed a really nice, fresh kind of like new perspective of life into some of these sort of dialogue that, these other characters could have. I think one of them is like there's a hawker for people that see the film that's kind of spruiking oxygen on the street. And, it was just these nice little sort of bits of tonal texture that I think when you're staring at a script for 10 years or 15 years, it can become quite,
Mhm.
it's nice to have a second perspective come in and just be like, oh, this person could just, a little line here, a good dialogue there that makes the characters sound a bit more unique, if that makes
Yeah,
sense.
sure.
So helped out with that, and it was really great benefit.
Perfect. And to pick up on something you just said, 10 or 15 years, how long had you been mulling this screenplay, writing this screenplay, and working on this project before you actually got it into production?
Well, I pitched the very first version of the concept to my producer, Lisa Shaughnessy, in 2005. And we were working on Superman Returns, I think, at the time. And it took me probably 5 years to start writing a draft because, I had a full-time with other movies and as a visual effects supervisor. I also like to do a lot of planning, so I spent quite a bit of time sort of doing flow charts and beat sheets and character arc diagrams and things like this. Yeah, also because it's a time travel movie, right? And there's a lot of mechanics, so I like to make sure that all those things are in alignment before I actually start putting words on the page. I'd say in about 2010 or 12, maybe, we started drafting seriously. And then between 2012 and 2016, I got a job I got an offer of a job to go and direct my first feature film in Malaysia, which was a studio movie over there called Tambiru. So I put this script on hold and went over and shot that. And that was a fantastic experience. Came back in, I think, 2019, and we went straight into production on this one. Essentially, like a week or two after I landed, we were greenlit and we went ahead on this one. So It's been kind of back to back on making these couple of films for probably about 6 years.
Yeah. So, and it's so important for people to hear that these projects can take a long time to kind of get going. Even if they turn out to be a success, it can still sometimes take a lot longer than we want. So just in general, let's talk about your sort of writing schedule. It sounds like this one was a little bit abnormal, but typically what does your writing schedule look like? Are you someone that writes in the morning, at night? Do you go to Starbucks? Do you write in a home office? How do you do your writing?
Well, I generally try and lock myself away in a room for, I'd say, if I'm going to do a serious draft, not just a polish or a dialogue pass or something, but like a proper draft, I'll probably allow myself about 4 weeks. And I'll go and get a hotel room somewhere or somewhere outside of my natural, normal day-to-day so that there's no distractions. I'm not a super early morning person, so I'll generally start writing and I'll try and just, I try not to set myself hard goals because I think it can be hard because sometimes you're sitting on one problem maybe for 3 or 4 days and then it cracks, right? And then that scene or that 3 or 4, in a short amount of time. But I generally try and say, okay, if I can get through 3 pages a day, that's okay, that's pretty productive. And I'll write solidly for maybe 6 or 8 hours a day and then call it quits and put it down and do it again. And I just try and do that, every day until I crack the draft, basically. So, which is usually around about 4 weeks, I've found. For me,
Perfect. And you mentioned that you started drafting seriously after about 5 years of sort of mulling it over and making notes and stuff. And I'm curious, who was involved in this drafting? And I'm really kind of just curious about your development process. Once you had a draft that you liked, who did you send it to and who was involved in these early drafts?
Yeah, well, so my producer, Lisa Shaughnessy, has been there with me from the beginning, right? And we've made a whole bunch of stuff together. So we work on a lot of things together. She's fantastic. So she's there all the time, So at the end, I try to not inundate her with reviews because, if for a writer, if you're reading your own words over and over infinitum, you can imagine how hard it is to stay objective. But for a producer, it can be equally as bad if you're forcing them to read your draft, every 2 days. Then it's hard for them to be impartial as well. So I try to only show her at the end of a draft. But we were really lucky as well through the process that each draft that we did, we had some really great backing from someone or another. So, for instance, in Australia, we have some government financing that can help out with draft financing specifically. So we got that a couple of times for a couple of rounds. And then you will show, Screen Australia, they're called in Australia, you'll show them the draft, they'll come on board for some consultation, give you some notes. But also, we were also lucky enough to work with who I consider to be a few of the greatest, script editors around in Christopher Vogler and Michael Haig as well, at various points in development. And also amongst some other Sheila Hanahan-Taylor, and some other Joan Sauer, some other great script editors. And each of them gave me invaluable, also Michael Reimer, gave me invaluable insight for a particular draft. And so they might come on and say, okay, one of them would be incredible with character, one of them would be incredible with structure. And so that would be the theme of that particular draft. And then they would just smash me on that one point for the draft until the film was working on that level. And then the time the next draft came around, we'd have another script editor who would be incredible in another area and they would smash me until that level was working. And so, it was great because going through this process, by the end of it, you feel like you've held the script up to every angle of examination that you come, and managed to answer every question that hopefully can be asked about it, I think.
So maybe you can just tell us, how can people see 2067? Do you know what the release schedule is going to be like?
Yeah, absolutely. So in the USA, it's being released on the 2nd of October, which is just tomorrow or the next day over there. I think if you Google it, you find it. It's going to be released theatrically. It's also going to be released online. There's a number of other territories. We've sold a lot of territories around the world, and over the next 6 months from tomorrow into next year, it's going to be released, staggered releases all around the world. So I think in the UK, it's being released in December. The Australian release date will be TBA, but it'll be soon in China and Germany and a whole bunch of other countries over the next few months. So.
Yeah, perfect. And what's the best way for people to keep up with what you're doing? Twitter, Facebook, a blog, anything you're comfortable sharing, I will round up for the show notes.
I have a Facebook page. It's called Seth Larney Director on Facebook. People can reach out to me that way. Also Twitter as well. I'm Seth Larney on Twitter. I'm also Seth Larney on Instagram. So yeah, check out what I'm doing on those pages.
Perfect. Well, I really appreciate you coming on and talking with me today, Seth. Good luck with this film and good luck with all your future films as well.
Thank you so much, bud. It's a pleasure.
Thank you. We'll talk to you later. A quick plug for the SYS Screenwriting Analysis Service. It's a really economical way to get a high-quality professional evaluation on your screenplay. When you buy our 3-pack, you get evaluations at just $67 per script for feature films and just $55 for teleplays. All the readers have professional experience reading for studios, production companies, contests, and agencies. You can read a short bio on each reader on our website, and you can pick the reader who you think is the best fit for your script. Turnaround time is usually just a few days, but rarely more than a week. The readers will evaluate your script on 6 key factors: concept, character, structure, marketability, tone, and overall craft, which includes formatting, spelling, and grammar. Every script will get a grade of pass, consider, or recommend, which should help you roughly understand where your script might rank if you were to submit it to a production company or agency. We can provide an analysis on features or television scripts. We also do proofreading without any analysis. We will also look at a treatment or outline and give you the same analysis on it. So if you're looking to vet some of your project ideas, this is a great way to do it. We will also write your logline and synopsis for you. You can add this logline and synopsis writing service to an analysis, or you can simply purchase this service as a standalone product. As a bonus, if your screenplay gets a recommend or a consider from one of our readers, you get to list the screenplay in the SYS Select database, which is a database for producers to find screenplays and a big part of our SYS Select program. Producers are in the database searching for material on a daily basis, so it's another great way to get your material in front of them. As a further bonus, if your script gets a recommend from one of our readers, your screenplay will get included in our monthly Best Of newsletter. Each month we send out a newsletter that highlights the best screenplays that have come through our script analysis service. This is a monthly newsletter that goes out to our list of over 400 producers who are actively looking for material. So again, this is another great way to get your material out there. So if you want a professional evaluation of your screenplay at a very reasonable price, check out www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/consultants. Again, that's sellingyourscreenplay.com/consultants. On the next episode of the podcast, I'm going to be interviewing writers, directors Lane and Ruckus Skye. They actually wrote the film Becky, which you might remember. I featured the directors of that film, Jonathan Millett and Carrie Murnian, on the podcast a few months ago in episode number 337. So definitely check that out if you haven't already listened. But Lane and Ruckus are actually here to talk about their new film, which they wrote and also directed, and that's called The Devil to Pay. We talk about how they got involved with Becky, how that film got made, as well as how they got this new film into production. These are two artists. They really kickstarted their careers far from Hollywood, and now they're getting movies made. So another really inspirational interview from Lane and Ruckus Skye next week. So keep an eye out for that episode. That's our show. Thank you for listening.